Becky McCullough is the Director of Recruiting at HubSpot, where she leads a team responsible for attracting and hiring top talent for the company's North American offices. Her role is focused on scaling HubSpot's recruitment engine, from optimizing interview processes to examining the role of data can play in hiring decisions and executing HubSpot's mission to grow a diverse and inclusive work environment. Prior to joining HubSpot in 2015, Becky led experienced hire recruiting from McKinsey & Company North American offices and started a recruiting career at Hendrick & Struggles, the global executive recruitment firm. She has an MBA from Columbia Business School and a BA in psychology from Tufts University, who will be presenting later. Go Jumbos. And we're bringing Becky on and this team to talk a little bit more about culture and building a great team in advance of kind of what's going to be talked about with Josh Newton and the team from UConn and some of the things that they're doing this year. So it's going to be a really exciting morning thinking about your team, your culture, everything like that. So without further ado, Becky.
Hi, everyone. How are you all doing? Everyone recovered from last night? Big night? Cool. So thanks so much for the warm introduction, Courtney. As she mentioned, my name is Becky McCullough. I'm super excited to be here today. Perhaps serendipitous that Katie wasn't able to join us this morning, but really excited to chat with you a little bit about culture and how to use that here. As I mentioned, I'm Becky. I'm the Director of Recruiting here at HubSpot in Cambridge. I'm also a proud alum, as Courtney mentioned, of Columbia Business School and Tufts University. Woo, Jumbos. This is me on my graduation day many years ago, but more importantly, the woman to my left is the reason I'm at HubSpot today. Her name is Allison Elworthy. She's one of my dearest friends. She's also a longtime HubSpotter. She was the first woman to join our executive team, and she currently leads our global customer support and success organization, a team of over 800 people. She's a big deal at HubSpot, and I'm so lucky to know her. And when I think about my experience at Tufts, I had a great time, I had a ton of fun, but what was most important to me is the culture of support, of caring, the one that helped me learn and grow, both personally and professionally. And as you can see from where I'm standing here today, that has taken me to my different places in my career and continues even as I'm an alum. And I think we can all agree that every place of learning and growth is shaped by its culture and its people. When I think about my time at Tufts, it wasn't just about the classes I took. It was about how the organization, how the university gave back to me. So today we're here to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about how to build a culture that people really love, that's ultimately going to translate to your alums and to your donors. And then how do you turn that culture into a flywheel? How does that become a part of your brand that you're able to communicate outward? And so the first thing you might be asking yourself is, what do I, someone who runs recruiting at a tech company, what am I doing here, standing in front of a room of advancement professionals talking about culture? Well, the thing is, at HubSpot, we take our culture very seriously, and it's part of the reason we've become so successful as a company. Before I dive into that culture piece in particular, let me give you a little bit of context about HubSpot. HubSpot is a sales and marketing software company. We work specifically with small businesses, and we help them grow their business through effective marketing and sales tactics. But more importantly, when our founders, Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah, built HubSpot years ago, they also built the company on the premise that the way that people shop and buy has fundamentally changed, and pioneered a concept that we call inbound marketing to change the way that our companies reach out to their prospective customers through things like content, social media, targeted ads, blogging, search engine optimization. Rather than just putting a message out there and seeing what happens, we're using that content to draw in the right customers to us. And so that creates a better relationship and greater trust. Now, similarly, on my team at HubSpot in recruiting, we're taking that same principle and applying it to the way that we attract candidates. Gone are the days where the recruiters on my team are cold calling candidates hour after hour. Instead, we're thinking about how we use relevant content, how we're targeting our prospective candidates out there, and using that to draw them into us, which ultimately hopefully means they become employees over time. And it turns out, as a company, we at HubSpot know a little bit about culture. We're lucky that our employees and industry publications externally have recognized us for our culture. And here's a snapshot of some of the awards we've received. And while the awards are great and have a huge impact on our employer brand, they're ultimately a byproduct of how we live on a day-to-day basis, our culture. And we're lucky that one of our co-founders, Dharmesh, thought that that culture was important enough to write it down. How many of you are familiar with the HubSpot Culture Code or have seen or read it? Ever true, folks? I know your hands are up. Our culture code is essentially what we believe our company should be in terms of our values and how we should operate. It's out there for the world to see. It's on www.culturecode.com. And we drew inspiration from Netflix's Culture Deck, which is another one I would recommend you check out. What it essentially is a 128-page slide deck that is all things what it means to live and breathe HubSpot. Dharmesh built it several years ago, and today, as of yesterday, it has just over 4 million views. I'm going to pause for a second. 4 million views, that's an audience that people dream of. And we're so lucky that our employees, that our candidates, and our customers really value this. But it took a lot of work. And when Dharmesh first launched our culture code internally several years ago, the reaction wasn't always positive. But what it ultimately did was created a conversation around who we are as a company, which has driven not only our business goals, but our personal goals as individuals. And so when you think about the impact that that has, it impacts our employees, it impacts our value proposition to our candidates, and it impacts our customers. Our customers care about this deeply. And so the first lesson that I want to talk through with you is write down what your culture means to you. How many of you in a word or phrase could, right off the bat, talk to us about what your culture is, what your institution's culture is? There aren't a lot of hands in the room. And that's okay, that's not surprising. It takes a lot of work to talk about culture. But what I'm saying is you don't need to necessarily create a 128-page slide deck. You can start really small. Get your team in a room, grab a group of students, grab a group of alumni, and ask them why they found your institution to be so special. It could be a one-line phrase. People love saying they came from Tufts University because of X. Start really small there, but when you start by writing it down and getting everyone on the same page, it's going to have a network effect over time. But what I will say is that the best culture is not the culture that appeals to everyone. And so the second lesson is don't try to be all things to all people. The best culture is a unique culture. And when we created our culture code at HubSpot, as I mentioned, it didn't always resonate with people externally. And so you have to recognize that when you're creating your culture, it's just as important to recognize who your culture isn't for as it is who it is for. I'll give you an example. How many of you are familiar with Glassdoor, the company review site? A bunch of people, yeah? We love Glassdoor at HubSpot. We invest a ton of time in our partnership with Glassdoor because we care deeply about the message that it sends to our employees and our candidates. Either myself or Katie, our Chief People Officer, responds to every single candidate interview review or employee company review on Glassdoor. That's how much we care about it. And earlier this week, I was on the phone with our account manager at Glassdoor, and we were talking about our interview reviews. And she showed me a word cloud, collection of words or phrases that were commonly used in our interview reviews. And on the left side of the page, she had all the word cloud associated with our positive reviews. And on the right side of the page, it was our negative reviews. And on the positive side of the page, the thing that was the biggest in the word cloud was the word autonomy. That's awesome. That is a core tenet of HubSpot's culture, and we've maintained that even as we've grown to be over 2,500 people today. The interesting thing was, the word that was the biggest on the negative side? Autonomy. And that's okay. We don't mind that. We want people to acknowledge why our culture is for them and why it isn't for them. Because ultimately, you have to be comfortable not being all things to all people. And when you're articulating your culture and the way that you use that to communicate to your donors, to your students, to your alums, is by recognizing that it's not just about talking about the good stuff, you gotta talk about the bad stuff too. And so my next lesson when you're thinking about culture is don't be afraid to have the difficult conversations. Your alums are having the conversations about the tough stuff that's going on, whether you're in the room or not, so be a part of the conversation. I'll give you an example here. A few years ago, we launched a pretty major overhaul to our product, a bunch of enhancements, a bunch of new features. Our engineering team worked tirelessly on this for months, and they couldn't wait to ship it when it was ready. They were going to get to it right before the holidays. It was a great period of time, and they launched it out to the market. They launched it on Black Friday. And then you can imagine that, one, our customers were not expecting this, and they realized that there were all these things that they didn't know about our product. But oh, by the way, everyone was on vacation for the holiday. And so our customer support team was inundated with all of these support requests, and the results were catastrophic. Our team internally was tired and angry. Our customer satisfaction went down. And it could have been a huge risk to our business. Our co-founders did something really important at that moment. They sent a note to every single one of our customers apologizing. They talked about the intention, they talked about what went wrong, and that more importantly, they talked about what we were doing internally to fix it. There could have been outrage as a result of this, and instead, our customers loved us more than ever, I swear. They really felt that by being real with them, by talking through our challenges and committing to them what we were going to do to make it better, they built an authentic relationship with us, and they built that trust with us. And those customers are still our customers today, many of them. And so my advice to you here is, there is no such thing as a perfect culture. There is such a thing as an authentic culture, so you should strive for that. But while we're talking about the tough stuff, we got to talk about the light stuff as well. You're dealing with people's jobs. We're dealing with people's businesses at HubSpot. You're dealing with people's money, and it's a big decision to where they're going to invest. And so while it's important to talk about the tough stuff, you got to make it a little lighthearted as well. At HubSpot, people work incredibly hard. We care deeply about our business and the role that we individually play in growing that. And so what that means is that it's really hard for people to check out because they don't want to miss things. And so one thing that we did as a little fun way to give people the okay to take some time off was created what we're calling the out-of-office email generator. It's an automated tool where you plug in a couple of key details about your when you're going to be out, where you're headed, and who your out-of-office is, and it spits back a witty, fun out-of-office response that we can put into our email. I'm headed down to Narragansett, Rhode Island in a few weeks, and I've already been testing out what I can be putting in here and coming up with some really great ideas. The cool thing is we also made this open to the external market. You can look it up. It's oogenerator.com. And we did that very deliberately because it not only sends a message to our employees that we want them to check out and enjoy their time away from the office and really recognize work-life fit, it sends a message to our candidates as well. It sends a message to our customers. And that culture of caring and thinking about them as individuals really has a flywheel effect. So we think about our culture. We want to make sure that it's authentic. We want to make sure that we cover the good stuff and the bad. And I think that's really important in your institutions as well. You need to make sure that your alums are recognizing that they can come back and enjoy their time with you, that your donors can really build a relationship. But what's equally important is that enjoyment and having fun is the opportunity to learn and grow. When I think about my time as a Tufts alumni so far, as a Columbia Business School alumni, what I really appreciate is how those institutions have made me better as a professional. And so my next tip as you're thinking about culture is make sure you're thinking really exponentially about how you can help your audience learn and grow. At HubSpot, we care deeply about this. It's a big part of our culture. And so for our employees on a day-to-day basis, we've implemented a bunch of things to make sure they are always learning and growing. First, we have a free books program. It's a simple form that people can fill out, and they can request any book, whether it's personal or professional, that they feel will help in their growth. And within 24 hours, it shows up in their e-reader account. We also have a tuition reimbursement. People can use up to $5,000 annually to apply towards their continuing education, whether it's in excelling in their current field or developing a new skill or expertise. Personally, I am really excited next year to do an executive coaching certification. I'm going to use my HubSpot tuition reimbursement for that. The other thing we have are what we call Hub Talks. Leaders in the public and private sector who we feel like we can learn from, and they join HubSpot if they're driving through town or have some time in their day. This woman on the screen is a woman named Patty McCord. She's the former Chief Human Resources Officer of Netflix. I mentioned Netflix as the culture deck that we drew our inspiration from. She's also been an advisor to HubSpot. She's an amazing, amazing person. And when she's in town, she comes and talks to our people team. That is invaluable. For our candidates in my role, we do the same thing. We're not, as I mentioned, we're not just bombarding them with LinkedIn in-mails or cold calls. We're giving them workshops, we're giving them certifications, we're giving them tech talks so that they can walk away and recognize that with HubSpot, they learned something. And so when they may not be looking for a job now, when they are, they're gonna remember that and they're going to trust us that much more when they consider where to take the next step in their career. I would challenge you all to think about how you can do that here. Is it just about calling a prospective donor? Or can you champion some of the thought leadership or a professor and the work that they're doing and share that with your alums? Can you host a networking opportunity for them to make meaningful connections? Can you share cool content that they wouldn't find elsewhere? These are some great ways for people to recognize how you're helping them learn and grow, and they're gonna be more likely to contribute down the line. So I'm gonna take a minute. Between when I started and now, my guess is you may have whispered to the person next to you and said, hey, this must be nice. They're HubSpot. They're a tech company, they're really successful, they've got a ton of money. How the heck am I supposed to do this in my role? The reality is that most of the things that I've mentioned have cost pennies on the dollar as it relates to the value that it gives to our organization. A lot of this stuff has been free or the cost of a book, which is just a few dollars. It's really important to recognize that it's not about spending the big bucks, it's about focusing on the bang for your buck and how that's going to help your culture and how it's going to help you achieve your goals over time. And so what's important about that is that you need to make sure that you know who you're actually trying to reach. And so when I think about the next lesson in terms of how you take that culture to the next level and use it to help you solve your goal, reach your goals, you have to know your audience. In my team, when I think about recruiting, we aren't just mass blanketing our messaging out. We're thinking about the recent college grad who might want to join HubSpot in an entry-level role. We're thinking about the 15-year industry veteran and why they might want to join a place like HubSpot. We spend a lot of time on our personas. That's a term that we've used on the marketing side too. And we want to make sure that those personas are real, they're authentic, and we recognize what are these people interested in, what do they care about, what's going to resonate with them as we communicate. And we adjust our communication strategy depending on who those people are. And so while a tech talk might work for some audiences, a roundtable discussion might work for others. And so I'd challenge you to think about how you can consider your different personas and adjust your tactics to reach them in a more meaningful way. It's going to feel personal, it's going to feel more authentic, and it's going to help you reach your goals. But the reality is you can't do that alone. And we've really perfected the art of making culture a team sport. We do have a few people on our team who are responsible for our employer brand, but in all honesty, it's a couple of people for a company of 2,500 people. There is no way that we would be able to reach our goals if we just solely relied on them. And so we've really relied on our employees, our interns, our leaders, and frankly our alums to help us create that message in the market and get it out there. I'll give you a couple of examples that I think are really easy to implement in your context as well. How many of you use social media accounts to help with your brand? Good number of people, yep. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We have an Instagram handle called HubSpot Life. It is all things HubSpot. And the cool thing is, our employer brand team does no work on this aside from finding employees who are really excited to share their day in the life. It's what we call an employee takeover. Here is an example of one of our employees on our support team who did a takeover for the day. She's also part of our People of Color at HubSpot initiative. It's one of our employee resource groups. And she talked about an event that they did where they went to a nonprofit and did some volunteer work. That's awesome, and we got some really cool engagement from people who we wouldn't have otherwise seen because that was meaningful to them. This cost no money. This was not a ton of man hours. It was just someone snapping some pictures during the day. Another example is from one of our partners, Wix. They had one of their interns do a takeover on Twitter and tweet about what they were doing throughout the day. That's really authentic, it's real, and that's a great opportunity for you to show your prospective donors what your students are doing on a day-to-day basis. Another thing that we do is we rely very heavily on employee-generated content. And so instead of spending a ton of money on this big, huge marketing campaign, if we, for example, are launching a new initiative, perhaps we run a big award, we equip our employees with some prompts, maybe some tweets, and we rely on them to get the word out to their networks. And so here's a couple of examples of how our sales team has really used that to articulate why it's important to have a career in sales. And maybe if you didn't think sales was a path for you, here's what you could do. It's important to think about how you can use that to help you achieve your goals. And so while you may traditionally be thinking about, hey, maybe I can get a bunch of students in a room to do a phone-a-thon where you're trying to get donations, what if you got them in a room for an hour and you had them do an article hack night? You get them in a room, hey, we want to talk about this, post an article on LinkedIn, post it on our blog, and you get people comfortable writing. That has a much bigger effect and will ultimately have a more authentic message that your prospective donors will really appreciate. But the reality is that with a culture, you have to take care of it. It is like a plant. It is growing, and you have to water it and give it a little bit of TLC. And the best cultures are the ones that don't stay the same. Our culture deck that we launched several years ago is not the same 128 slides than it was a few years ago. And that's really important, and that's because we measure our culture on a regular basis. At HubSpot, we do quarterly employee engagement surveys. We do it on a quarterly basis because we want to respond quickly and we want to make a big difference. On the recruiting side, we survey our candidates on a regular basis. We want to know what they like and don't like about our interview process so that we can iterate on it. And so I would encourage you to think about how you can survey your alums to understand what they're interested in, what they want to get engaged on, what they haven't been psyched about hearing from. And this is important across all ends of the organization, but you really have to set the tone at the top. We are so lucky that we have co-founders who are super, super invested in this, and they are more than happy to talk to a room of prospective interns as much as they are talking to the next senior hire that we might be making. And so I would encourage you to think about the way that your presidents, your professors who are really highly regarded in the industry, can be a part of that conversation. Because not only are your audiences, your donors, your alums going to learn something, but the people doing the talking, your leaders, are probably going to learn something too. And so my last tip on this is make sure that you're always learning and you're always iterating. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to fail, because that's how you're going to learn and grow yourselves. I'll give you an example on this. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Dean Michael Sorrell from Paul Quinn College in Dallas, Texas. Paul Quinn is transforming the way that students learn and grow through a real work-based education program. And I didn't meet Dean Sorrell through our campus recruiting program. I met him through our CFO, who happened to run into Dean Sorrell and saw how passionate he was about this and thought that we needed to learn about this. And so we were lucky as a people leadership team to be in a room with him and learn how we as a company can be partnering better with organizations and institutions like his. And so I think recognizing that learning is the best part of growing your culture is what's going to set you up for success in the long run. And so before I leave today, I want to give you a little bit of a challenge. If you're anything like me, you've been scribbling down some notes. I always come away from these conferences with pages and pages of notes. And on a Friday, all I want to do is get home. And on Monday, I look back at that notepad and I think, gosh, this is a lot of stuff to think about. And I put it away and I say, this isn't the time, I got to catch up on email, and then I never look at it again. And so my ask to you is, don't try to do everything I just mentioned. Pick one thing. Maybe it's doing a student takeover of your social accounts. Maybe it's doing an article hack night. Maybe it's going out and meeting someone new in your prospective network. Do one thing, maybe turn to the person next to you and exchange some contact information so you can hold yourself accountable, or send me a tweet or an email and I'll respond back. But make sure you do that, because at the end of the day, what you need to recognize is that you need to start small, you need to experiment, you need to be okay with failing, and that's the way you're going to set your culture up for success long-term and help you achieve your goals. It's been really wonderful to be here today. Thanks so much for letting me stand in. I'm happy to take any questions right now. I think Courtney's going to come up as well.